I've been getting a lot of questions on the channel in the last few months or so about what this monitor is. I've kind of been featuring it on various videos in the past, and the question kind of pops up every once in a while. What is this monitor? Tell me more about it. And today on the channel, I am going to basically cover this in more detail. This is the Checkmate IPS 19-inch retro monitor. Now, this is a hand-built customizable display, and it's really used for all your retro gaming needs. It's also very much modular, and it's something that honestly has pretty much replaced every single retro monitor that I am using, other than CRTs, of course, because I still have a couple of CRTs in my house that I still love to use from time to time. But this monitor is awesome. I will say that I did end up getting this monitor about 4 or 5 months ago now. It's been a while since it shipped to my house, but I wanted to kind of sit on it for a while and use it myself and really get familiar with it, get familiar with all the good things and the quirks about it before I decided that I would talk about this particular monitor if anyone is interested in taking a look at it. I also want to say that this is not a sponsored video. Everything that you see here, this monitor I paid for. So this is not, something that the company is asking me to do. It's really just, me kind of talking about it and letting you guys know, answering any questions that people may have about what this monitor is. So essentially, this is a 19-inch flat panel display, and the display itself is not really anything, special. Like if you're used to using a Dell flat panel monitor, like a 19-inch, 5:4 aspect ratio monitor, I think the panel itself is pretty much the same as that. But if you're expecting like an OLED display or something like that, you're not going to get it here. The main benefits of this monitor is its massive array of inputs, and this is where it really comes into its own. And if you look at the back of the system here, you can see that there is just a ton of different inputs. And this really does take care of all my retro gaming needs. So what I mean by that is, if I want to use composite input, it's very easy. The slot 0 has 2 composite inputs that I can plug into. This is Nintendo 64 plugged directly into composite, and it looks fantastic. I mean, it's one of the best composite outputs I've seen on any display, really. When we think about composite, I mean, we usually think it's not the best, but you can see here, it looks very, very clean. There's also HDMI inputs as well. There's also a 31 kilohertz VGA input with VGA audio in as well. And this is awesome for retro PC. So if you have an old retro PC like the one that I have here, you can easily just plug it into the 31 kilohertz VGA and it will look incredible. The other thing that I use the VGA input on is my Sega Dreamcast. I have a VGA connector or output from my Sega Dreamcast going in to the Checkmate display, and you've seen me kind of demonstrate this before in previous videos, but an incredible picture as well. So the slot 0 really takes care of a lot of your input needs just off the jump. Now, what's really interesting about the Checkmate display is that it is modular, and what I mean by that is these particular modules can be swapped in and out. So there is room for 2 additional modules that can be hooked up. The second module that I have here is known as IPS Retro Scaler, and this is essentially just a retro upscaler, similar to what you would see with like a Retro Tink or something along those lines, or an OSSC. Now, it's not as advanced, obviously, as something like the Retro Tink. It certainly doesn't do 4K or anything like that. It is geared specifically for this monitor itself. But what this retro scaler does give you is additional inputs. On the back here, you can see that we have a SCART input, we have component, we have S-Video, we also have RGBI, which means that you can connect up, something like a Commodore 128 in 80 column mode and various other RGBI inputs as well. It even has an RF input. Now, I'm not really sure why anyone would still use RF, but the input is there for it, just in case you need it. Now, this is great for systems such as the Commodore Amiga, which really does look very clean on this particular device. As you can see here, I'm playing Pinball Fantasies, and this is running on my Amiga 1200, which is going directly in via RGB SCART, and it looks very, very clean. So having this combination of the slot 0 inputs and the retro scaler inputs really just gives you all the possible inputs you could ever want. And I've thrown many different systems at the Checkmate display, and overall, it hasn't really let me down once. I've even plugged in a Sony PlayStation 2 via the SCART cable, and that looks extremely clean as well, as you can see here. I also tried various other things, such as a Sega Mega Drive going into RGB SCART, and you can see the picture quality here looks fantastic. Another thing that I really wanted to test and make sure worked good was the resolution switching. In some instances with retro scalers, there is going to be some delay when it comes to resolution switching. A game like Agony by Psygnosis is my favorite test for this, because Agony really does have the ability to, trip up many an upscaler. And I've seen this when it switches from its interlace mode to its just, low res mode. And some of the earlier upscalers like the OSSC and the FrameMeister, those particular upscalers would take a, half a millisecond to kind of resync into a new resolution. Now the RetroTink 5X and the 4K Pro do a much better job. So what does the IPS Retro Scaler look like here? Well, I can tell you that it's really good. It switches resolutions extremely quickly, and there's no issues here at all. So overall, this is a very professional display with these particular modules. The other thing that I want to talk about is that this particular Checkmate display was originally a Kickstarter, which took, I think, a couple of years to, to see it through from start to finish. And it was something that I backed originally. And look, this is definitely a niche retro device. And because it is a niche retro device, you're going to be paying for the privilege. This is not something that you can pick up for a few $100. This definitely has a premium price tag associated with it. But given the fact that I'm using this display pretty much for all my content creation, all my video creation, and using it just as my day-to-day for all my retro gaming needs, then for me, this is really worth the money. But if you are looking to buy one, at a glance, there's going to be some sticker shock, and I want to be very clear on that. Now, you are still able to order these on checkmate1500plus.com, but again, this is not going to be a cheap device. This is something for an enthusiast that really, knows exactly what they're looking for. But overall, I love this thing. Now, I was originally going to cover this monitor, like I said, when I first picked it up when it came out, as a lot of people were, curious about the system or the monitor itself, but I did want to sit on it for a while, and I'm glad I did, because there were a couple of initial teething problems with this display, notably the backlight bleed issue that I first noticed when it came out. Now, this was something that I had kind of reported and talked to a couple of other people about. I was going to make a video about it, but I did want to sit on it for a bit, and I'm glad I did. But ultimately, this backlight bleed issue really just is an issue that can be easily resolved, and I believe that since this issue was identified, it has already been fixed, on the manufacturing side. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was just adding some washers to the mounting of the bezel inside the case itself. This was something that people had recommended that I do myself. Again, if you're not someone that is wanting to open up a monitor that you just, spend a few $100s on, I totally understand that, but for me, I was able to do this, and I've had zero issues with it since. And overall, I'm pretty happy that there was a very simple and easy resolution to this problem. So what makes this monitor so good and so unique compared to anything that you can use out there, or any other CRT, or even, a retro upscale like a RetroTink? Well, this particular monitor looks good, right? It's got that beige white look about it. There's also a black version that you can get as well. But if I put this next to my Amiga, for example, the color scheme is on point with the rest of my Amiga equipment. And this is one thing that I was personally going for. I wanted to have that really nice cream white beige look that kind of just reminds me of 90s nostalgia. The monitor also comes complete with 4-inch stereo speakers on either side, and look, overall they sound pretty good for what they are. I mean, it's not going to replace some high-end, audio equipment, but for monitor speakers, they're pretty damn good. And of course, the main draw is just the myriad of inputs that this monitor can display. Now, one of the things that this retro monitor does, it does support 15 kilohertz, 50 hertz, and 60. So it takes care of all your PAL NTSC needs. If you have arcade boards like a Supergun that supports 15 kilohertz only, it'll work with that as well. One of the things about many of the upscalers that I've used in the past, excluding the RetroTink 4K, is that while they did have different inputs for various things, they didn't support everything. And the Checkmate display does support pretty much everything that I can think of. I also want to point out that this monitor plays extremely nice with both PAL and NTSC. I've got a PAL Commodore 64, I've got various PAL Amigas, I've got obviously NTSC game consoles and some computers, and it just works completely across the board with everything as mentioned that I've thrown at it. Even the original Xbox, which is a system that has various types of outputs. You can have composite output, you can have component. There's also an HDMI mod that I have on this one here. The Checkmate display supports every single one of them. Now, one of the most important things about a flat panel display like this is it has to be as low latency as possible. Now, I haven't been able to test this myself, but according to the Checkmate website, the input latency is less than a frame. So if we're talking about less than a frame, then that is pretty good. In my experience playing games, like playing, something like Pinball Fantasies on the Amiga where reaction time is important, I'm definitely not feeling any additional input delay on this particular display. Now, here is a list of all the systems, computers, and consoles that the Checkmate display supports. And look, I haven't been able to test all of these because I don't have all these systems, but I've tested a lot of these. And look, as I've mentioned, the display really does work with everything that I've thrown at it. Now, another part of this display that I haven't really covered is that it also has HDMI output. So what does this mean? Well, it means that you can take the signal from your Checkmate and pipe it into a capture device, which means that you can get a one-to-one capture of the display itself. So if you want to capture composite video signals, or if you want to capture RF video signals, then you can easily do that with this device. So overall, look, I am very, very happy with the Checkmate 19-inch retro display. I think if you are a retro enthusiast, this is something that you may want to consider, especially if you're someone that has a lot of different systems and you want to basically just get the very best out of all of them. Now, of course, as mentioned, this is not something that's going to be for everyone. But if you are someone that does want to use your old retro devices, computers, consoles on one display only, then this Checkmate 19-inch retro monitor will get the job done for you. I'm pretty happy with it. Again, this is not a cheap device. This is a very niche device. But hopefully this does answer all the questions that people were asking me about this display. Check out this video if you want to learn more about it. We're going to leave it here for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.